Okay, now's about the time when we will be asking you to take your seats again, if we are in person or now in the comfort of your own home. Some may be back in offices, but we're going to be starting the next session here. This is going to be the focus group updates, the LSIC focus group updates. My name is Josh Cahill. I am the Deputy Director of LSIC. We're going to be introducing the panelists one by one for each of the themes: extreme access, dust mitigation, ISRU, extreme environments, excavation and construction, and surface power. They're going to be given about 6 minutes to give you an overview of how the year has gone to this point and perhaps some of the things they have in mind moving forward. Then we're going to take a pause, and this is when you can use the Q&A function in the Zoom to write your questions in. We're just going to pause during that moment while we transition to the next speaker. If we don't, since we don't take questions that don't think you're not being listened to, we're going to be saving those questions for a panel later in the session. So once that transition takes place and we do all 6 speakers, then we'll have about 20 minutes to answer these questions. Also, to remember, when you ask a question in the Q&A, please direct it at the speaker. So, for instance, our extreme access facilitator is Dr. Angela Stickle. Please say at Angela or at extreme access so we know how to direct the question a little bit more appropriately. Without further ado, I think we can get started here. Dr. Stickle, are you ready to take the reins?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
All right, we'll get started in just a second. Thanks everybody for coming back after lunch. As Josh said, we're going to be talking about all of the focus groups for the consortium in the next hour or so. And just as a reminder, I know Ben talked about the overall LSII activities at APL earlier on in the day, and the consortium is really our opportunity to interface with the community and to talk to all of you and be kind of a conduit between you and NASA to help develop technology to get us all back to the moon. So my name is Dr. Angela Stickle, and I am the Extreme Access Focus Group Facilitator. And if you go to the next slide, please. The Extreme Access is one of the 6 main focus groups and focus areas of LSII. Extreme Access is concerned with developing technologies that enable humans and robots to really access any place on the moon at any time, especially some of those really difficult areas that we maybe haven't previously been able to explore very well. This includes both surface and subsurface areas. So areas of technology that are particularly of interest in the Extreme Access Focus Group include things like mobility and navigation, hazard detection, autonomous systems, communications, things like accessing steep slopes or PSRs or really exceptionally rocky terrains, getting in and out of subsurface voids, things like that. Basically all of these areas that are sort of difficult to access, which is how we get our awesome name. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the goals of Extreme Access are really to identify the critical technologies that are needed to access these difficult areas on the moon, mainly focusing on robotic access, navigation, and exploration of the lunar surface and subsurface. My NASA counterpart is Dr. Terry Fong at NASA Ames, who is the NASA Autonomous Systems Capability Lead, and our leadership team is joined by Sarah Withy at APL, who is helping us with our Lsic and technology spotlights, Alice Kokoros, who is helping us with our subgroups, and I'll talk a little bit about those later. And then also our subgroup leads, which are currently Sarah Withy and Carolina Restrepo from Goddard Space Flight Center. We meet the 2nd Thursday of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And so if you want to join us, please join Lsic, and you can get on our mailing list and also attend the telecons. The links are on the website and also on our wiki pages. Our subgroup is made up of organizations across the 4 main groups of LSIC. We are more than half industry partners, but we do include a lot of folks from academia, nonprofits, and other government agencies as well. So if you go to the next slide, please. Our year one activities have really revolved around a couple of main themes. So we wanted to build a community that specializes in all of the technologies that are needed to access the lunar surface and subsurface. And so to do this, we've held monthly meetings, and we've tried to do a variety of different types of meetings. We've had discussions, guest speakers, smaller focused workshop type things. We participate with the other focus groups as well in their themed workshops and activities. We have identified a couple of ad hoc subgroups that we are forming to have more focused discussions that are based on interests of the members of our subgroup. I'll talk about those in a minute. And we're identifying technology-themed subgroups to continue further focused conversations, and that's all been sort of started in the past year. And this is sort of a common theme you'll probably hear through all of the focus groups. We have stood up a collaboration wiki space that Rachel mentioned earlier to help facilitate conversations and connections between our members. We have also held a themed workshop that was of particular interest to members of Extreme Access, and so we had the workshop on lunar mapping for precision landing back in early March, which focused on terrain relative navigation technologies for the lunar surface, and was a way to bring together, can you go to the next slide? Was a way to bring together folks from NASA centers, data providers, industry partners, and other folks interested in lunar TRN to talk about what data we have, what data we need, what technology exists, and what we might need to develop further to have a really robust terrain relative navigation systems for the moon. So the workshop was held in early March, like I said. We had over 400 people attend, and I think you'll hear this from some of the other focus groups too. A big thing that we like to do with these workshops is come up with some concrete actions that can help the community and help NASA. So I don't have a lot of time to go into these, but this slide is up on our website, and we came up with a few things that are important for future technology development and talking about needs that the community has identified to make accessing the lunar surface easier and more sustainable. So if you go to the next slide, please. And following on this theme is our year two goal for the focus group is to identify specific mission or elements or systems that will be needed to explore these challenging lunar environments, and to identify specific technology needs and gaps and prioritize them within the community. And so we're going to be standing up subgroups to talk about different technology needs, to specifically look at exploring PSRs and lunar pits or lava tubes. And if you go to the next slide,
1 minute.
we're going to do this through subgroups, and so we're going to have several different subgroups and technology themes. If you are interested in joining the subgroups, please do. If you go to the next slide, they're all up on our Confluence page, and you can just put your name in as a participant. We have a few that are still organizing based on these different technology themes we've identified. So this is an example of position, navigation, and timing. We are still getting these organized. And in the next slide, or we also have some other themed ones for specific resources or technologies that have been identified that people want to talk more about. So that was a brief overview of our activities. Please do join our telecons and join our wiki. And we look forward to hearing from you and all of your ideas and technology for the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Okay, so next we have Dr. Jorge Nuñez. He is our facilitator for dust mitigation. When you're ready, Jorge.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
Indeed.
great. Yes, so thank you, Josh. And so as Josh mentioned, my name is Jorge Nuñez, and I am the lead facilitator for the dust mitigation focus group. And so I also want to point out, so our colleague on the NASA side is Michael Johansson, who is the technical integration manager for dust mitigation for NASA. And so he and I work very closely in collaboration. And really, this provides an opportunity to, as part of this focus group, is to provide feedback, to NASA. And this is a way that members of the community can really help NASA try to understand, what are the challenges and issues associated with dust mitigation. And so our focus group really is almost consists of almost 90 organizations, right? So half is industry and over 30% is academia, and we almost have 10% each, respectively, from government and nonprofit. And so the goals, and I'm not going to get into too much detail here, right? But it's really to build a community, of everyone interested in dust mitigation. So it's not only folks who are developing the technologies, right, for dust mitigation, dust tolerance, but it's also people who are interested, lunar scientists, as well as systems developers who are also have a stake and are interested in some of the technologies that members of our group are developing. So we're trying to cast a really wide net here and want to welcome everybody who's interested in dust mitigation to participate in our focus group. And so one of the things we're interested, right, is not only harnessing the power of our community, folks' expertise that we have, but it's also really trying to assess what are the challenges and needs in dust mitigation and dust mitigation technologies and identify gaps. The other thing, right, is maybe there are technologies that are already available, and so what we're hoping with these communities, right, is to identify what potential technologies are available already that could be adapted for the lunar and space environment. And so we meet on the third Thursday of the month, right, from 12 to noon, at noon Eastern. And so we have a website there as well that we love to check out, and that's where we post also. You can catch some of the previous meetings. And of course, we also have a Confluence page as well, where we really want to continue the discussions and engagement. And then I also want to point out that we also have an additional team member, so we're expanding our network. Okay, so if you go to the next one. Slide. And so dust really encompasses everything. And so we're taking the approach here is that really we need a integrated dust mitigation strategy because dust permeates every lunar system, right? When you're talking about surface operations, whether you're spacesuits, rovers, mechanisms, right? Habitats, right? For the, want to keep the dust out. Same thing with ascent and descent systems, right? Where you have plume generation as these lander systems are coming down and generating lots of plume that could cause issues. And then, of course, right, even orbital, because, once we collect samples and astronauts come in, right, they're going to be bringing that dust is going to be inside the cabin and it's going to get inside. And so we need to have also technologies to be able to address that dust issue. Next slide, please. And so within that, we have sort of the architecture elements, right? Then there's these sort of focused areas within dust mitigation that we're trying to focus, right? In terms of technology areas. So I'm not going to be able to get into detail of each, right? But it encompasses, right, specific like optical systems, right, mechanisms, fabrics, right, filtration, right, surface modification. So if you're thinking about like landing pads and plumes or camera lenses, right? So all of these areas, right, need to have dust mitigation solutions to address these challenges. Okay, so next slide. And so what we've done for the first year is, right, really focusing on building our community, right? And so we've been having these monthly meetings, right, focused on specific topics, right? We've had guest speakers, and so on the right you see some of the contributed presentations by different organizations from industry and academia, as well as from NASA. So we really want this to be a broad community participation. We also, obviously, similar to what Angela mentioned, right, we're using sort of the communication tools, right, like Confluence, where we continue the discussions. So it's not just limited to our monthly focus meetings, right? We can have continued dialogue and in collaborations through these media. And then, of course, right, so one of the things that we just recently started, right, is identify these theme subgroups to really help us, dig deeper into some of these areas. Okay, so next slide, please.
1 minute.
And so we also developed these. So one of the things that came out of this was like we need to have a dust mitigation workshop, right, to really identify some of these initial challenges and gaps. And so I'm not going to be able to get to detail this, but I want you to visit our the workshop website where we have these some of the outcomes that came out of this, right, where we need to identify, where the community, you and the community, identify the challenges and issues. And so we had over 340 attendees participate in this. Okay, next slide. So what are we looking forward, right? So we, as part of it, building the community, right, not only do we want to create, really delve deeper with the workshop, really it sort of scratched the surface. And so we want to continue delving into some of these issues with the subgroups, right? And we want to continue developing some of the recommendations and gaps for dust mitigations and how we can develop the solutions for this. And so I really welcome you to, even if you're interested in dust mitigation and participating, I really welcome you to, here at the bottom, reach out to participate in some of these subgroups. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge. So I apologize. I forgot to pause after Dr. Stickle's talk. So we'll take a moment to allow questions as we transition to the next talk, perhaps 2 moments. Evan, it looks like you put something in the chat. If you could put that in the question and answer, please, that'd be great. So again, we're slowing this down just a little bit so people can ask their questions and we'll answer them in a panel after all the facilitators have gone over their slides. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Karl Hibbitts. He is the lead facilitator for in-situ resource utilization. Karl, when you're ready, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Josh. Can you go back one slide, though? Start with that, because I want to give acknowledgement to the other facilitators, Kirby Runyon and Michael Nord. We together are a team, and we work this RSRU focus group together, so you'll get emails if you're on the focus group from any of us. Next slide, please. So the focus group, we have a goal, which is to identify and document the current lunar surface RSU technologies, specifically those related to the extraction, storage, and utilization of O2 and H2O. There are many resources that are on the surface of the moon, but the RSU focus group focused on these, as well as other volatiles and potentially metals that can be obtained from that as well. Okay. We had our kickoff meeting June 17th of 2020, and after that we had a couple of focus group meetings focused on developing the technologies related to that, as well as a workshop in September of 2017. We generally have about 100 people attend this on a monthly basis. The meetings are every third Wednesday from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And like the other focus groups, we have a website, and we also have a wiki, a Confluence site. And the Confluence is used extensively to continue conversations that we hold on a monthly basis to keep the conversations going. If you're interested in joining this focus group, you can email me, or email Kirby, or email Michael Nord as well. We work very closely with NASA as part of this focus group. You can see us three facilitators, but also with the NASA SCLT led by Jerry and Omar. We meet with them each Wednesday along with Julie Kleinhans and Dan Linney. Our focus group is composed of about 60% of industry. This is very similar to Lsic as a whole. A little bit more industry, a little bit less academia, about equal partitions, 10% of government and nonprofit. So representative of the Lsic as a whole. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we had a workshop in September 17th of 2020, which we invited, I think, over 100 institutions, over 200 attendees. We had 6 from supply side, 6 from the demand side. The point of this workshop was to understand the needs and the demands for RSU in order to constrain how much needs to be built. Because our job here in the RSU focus group is to enable you, the community, to understand what technologies need to be built, what gaps there are in building them, how to get the money, et cetera. Enable you. So as part of this, the workshops show that we need approximately 10 to 100 metric tons of propellant a year, which means in a single year by the end of the decade. So that's pretty near term, with 80% of the demand being LOX. And this is a number that we use to carry forward in terms of what the development of a pilot plant or a full production facility would need to be used. Okay. Next, please. Oh, yes. We need to keep in mind that we may want to update this with a recent selection of SpaceX's HLS provider, but we do not anticipate that this would affect our metrics of 10 to 100 metric tons per year, though it could affect how one delivers the materials to the surface of the moon. Next slide. After the workshop, we continue our monthly meetings. I want to give you a bit of update on where those are going, give you a view of how the last year went. Our vision is enabling networking, learning, developing collaborations, impacting NASA. And as part of this, we have presentations from a wide variety of diverse groups, including SEO to describe what that is about. We heard already today on that. Blue Origin on the capabilities of lunar gravity on their New Origin's vehicle. Private-public partnerships and different sources of funding, modularity and maintenance in terms of ISRU technology, spacecraft missions that can inform us on the presence of volatiles on the surface, the effects of mining on the surface, what that can do to the environment, different technologies such as molten salt electrolysis, solar towers, and the concept of mining on the moon itself. And next, please. We also, developed more recently, this is a brainchild of Kirby Runyon, his concept of who's who in IRCU in order to continue this facilitation of networking and bring information to each other. Currently, there are 32 of you who have filled in this who's who, which is focused on IRCU. Each of the other focus groups have something similar. The color codes simply mean industry, academia, etc. Very similar distribution in compared to the composition or the makeup of the focus group itself. So please continue to contribute to the who's who and use it as a networking device as well. Speaking of which, next slide, please. We recently took a survey of how well we're doing and what you expected to get out of the IRCU focus group. So what were you hoping to get out of it? What benefits did you get? And what specific suggestions do you have going forward? And this is what I want to key on now.
1 minute,
next slide, please. Thank you. More technical resource and networking. We took that to heart. From now on, we will modify our monthly meetings a bit. Last 10 minutes will be dedicated to networking and Zoom meetings, and we'll work with that. We'll start that with the next focus group meeting week after next. Our June focus group meeting will be dedicated to networking and will continue to populate the library. Next slide, please. And the next one. So finally, come to the annual goals. Clear goals and deliverables brings us to the very last slide, which is right here. We are formulating a goals and deliverables which are built around the need to enable you to develop technologies for the sustained presence on the moon, tens to 100 metric tons of O2 and H2O per year, identify tech that needs maturing or to fly for risk mitigation, assess NASA's current tech funding approaches and make recommendations to NASA, and evaluate the effectiveness of the IRCU focus group. And these would be goals that we would hope you can contribute to. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karl. So we'll take a moment for you to use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask your questions. I see some questions coming in now. That's great. So we're going to be saving these for a panel after the facilitators give you their overviews. We'll pause for a moment right here. Okay, so I think we are ready to move on. Our next speaker is Dr. Benjamin Greenhagen. He's going to give us an overview of Extreme Environments Group.
All right, great. Thanks, Josh. You can go to the next slide. You're right. So the Extreme Environments Group, really what we're focusing on are technologies that enable the survival and operation in extreme lunar environments. And the entire lunar environment is pretty extreme, but we are trying to understand the relationship between the general lunar environment and the specific parameters that are at different landing sites and how they differ across the moon. So the leadership of this focus group includes myself as the facilitator. Kevin Somerville is our NASA point of contact. And we also have Karen Stockdale-Cahill, who is our subgroup coordinator, Alice Coronis, who's the strategic planning and coordination, and then certainly not least, we have our very, very hardworking subgroup leads that span industry, academia, and nonprofit, and we'll talk more about subgroups in just a minute. We do meet on the second Tuesday of the month. We're kind of the odd group. Sometimes we call ourselves the unfocused group, and you can see we also have a slightly delayed starting time. We start at 5 after and end at 5 before. And you can see all the other information right there. Next slide, please. So our vision is to build a community specializing in extreme lunar environments. Then we also want to provide and maintain community recommendations and guides to encourage technology, especially testing in relevant environment and TRL. So if you're interested in that, the breakout session tomorrow related to technology will be very interesting. And then we also want to look at capabilities and gaps related to specific lunar surface environments. And during our first year, we've been working towards a number of those things. Related to building the community, we've been doing our monthly meetings both at the focus group and subgroup level. The subgroups themselves were defined based on community input. We had a number of surveys, and the members of the focus group decided which subgroups we should have, which was very interesting. And then as has been mentioned before, our collaboration to Confluence, we're really trying to take that. It's a great tool for enabling discussion, in particular for people who can't attend the meetings, but we want to take that to the next level and have it be a go-to resource where people want to go to get their information and see what is new on there as well. And I'll be talking about that later. One of the bigger activities we did was an activity to get us towards kind of understanding these specific lunar surface environments, and I'll talk about that as well. Next slide. So here are our focus groups. They're broken down into general environmental categories: radiation, regolith and surface interface, space weathering and plasma, thermal and illumination, and the vacuum exosphere environment. Each of the subgroups does meet on their own monthly, independent from the main focus group meeting. So there's a number of people in the focus group that attend the focus group meeting and maybe one subgroup meeting. That's totally fine. And there are some who attend a lot of them, which is really, really amazing. The subgroups were stood up very early in our process. 3 of them were stood up in July 2020, and then the last one was stood up in December 2020. So they're fairly mature at this point. All of them have their own space on Confluence that's very well populated with information about the subgroup and also community resources that subgroup has decided they want to focus on in the near future. Next slide. And then our larger activity, this was a multi-month activity we started on back in January, and we wanted to take this notion of the lunar surface environment and break it down and say these different places on the moon have different environments. So the different environments we evaluated are shown here on the right. They're split into polar environments and non-polar environments, and these were chosen to basically bracket all of the types of landing sites that have been suggested for both robotic and human exploration. Over the course of the past several months, you can see in our plot there in the bottom left, we've been meeting at the focus group leadership level, also at the focus group meeting level, and in the subgroup meetings to work on this. And it's included significant portions of multiple focus group meetings and subgroup meetings, and culminated, not quite culminated, but peaked with a 2-hour working meeting that we had in April 2021, last month. Next slide. And if you have been taking part of this, you'll know about this, but if you haven't, all of this is on Confluence. So you can go there and you can see all of our environments broken down. If you click on any of them, you'll get additional information about the environments with description and figures, and then each of the subgroups has gone through and assessed each of those 7 environments with how they would affect technology, how they're described in NASA documents and whatnot. All of this is on Confluence and will remain there to be a resource moving forward. Next slide. And then at thank you. Then at our working meeting, this was last month, we started off with subgroup lightning talks where each subgroup lead went up and really set the stage for what we were focusing on by saying these are the main stressing factors of our environment type at these different places on the moon. Then we had a very productive rapid fire collection of opinions. We got over almost 300 individual comments on Confluence. Once again, everything is on Confluence. which provides us really nice resource. And then since that meeting, the work has continued. The subgroups went and ranked all of the specific environments in terms of how much they stress their technology types. And right now we're moving towards wrapping up that exercise in our June monthly meeting. Next slide. And then looking towards the future, your two goals, we split it in half. One of them continues very much with the surface environment evaluation, focusing on the capabilities and gaps of one or more prioritized environments, and then leading to a publication related to that. And then on the subgroup side, these resource guides are getting more and more developed every month, and our focus is on having one of them be published also during the second year. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. So again, we're going to pause for 1 minute and allow you to write your questions in the Q&A function for Zoom. So take your time. We have plenty of questions coming in, and we'll get to them in the panel session after the facilitators have spoken. Okay, so our next speaker is Athonu Chatterjee. He is our excavation and construction facilitator, and he will give you an overview of the year's activities. When you're ready.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Josh. Hello, everyone. My name is Athonu Chatterjee, and I'm the lead facilitator of the excavation and construction focus group here at APL. Next slide, please. So as the name excavation and construction suggests, we do some heavy lifting, and our ultimate vision is to help NASA build affordable, robust, autonomous construction of infrastructure on the lunar surface to establish a sustained human presence. So our team, Dr. Mark Helberger, Principal Technologist at NASA, is our NASA lead, our NASA point of contact. And at the APL side, I'm the lead facilitator. Jibu Abraham and Dr. Claudian is helping us with this focus group. So regarding the focus group constitution, we have over 500 members, about 40% from industry, 30% from academia, and another 30% from government and nonprofit. So we have a very good spread across industry, academia, government, and nonprofit. Like other focus group, we have monthly meetings the last Friday of every month. We have a very active Confluence wiki site where community discussions are held. And of course, there is an external website, Lsic external website, and there is the listserv mailing list, which we use extensively to communicate with the community. Next slide, please. So regarding the technical focus areas, as you see in the pyramid on the left, rather a triangle, our goal is to build sustainable infrastructure right on the top here. In order to do that, we need certain pieces of infrastructure. The ones we are focusing on right now are landing and launch pads, habitats, both in situ and deployable, overground, underground, then infrastructures like roads, berms, etc. And another area we have started getting into, and we want to get into more so in due course, is space architecture. From the point of view of keeping human beings and their needs at the center. So to facilitate the building of this infrastructure, we need several technologies, and the ones we are focusing on right now are additive construction, autonomous construction, specific high fidelity excavation tools for lunar applications, and processing technologies, manufacturing technologies for lunar surface, such as sintering, additive manufacturing, regolith processing, and so on. And to top it all off and to service the things we mentioned above, we feel that another category that needs more attention and we want to give it going forward is in-situ repair and outfitting. Building a big lunar base requires maintaining. It will require spare parts. It will require maintenance and activities like that. And also, we want to come up with get more knowledge about outfitting requirements for this infrastructure. So in-situ repair and outfitting is another category we are extensively looking at. Next slide, please. Regarding the focus group activities, this past year, we have built a vibrant community. Our focus groups has over 500 members. Last year when we started, it had only 100 members, so we have grown tremendously. We are building and leveraging alliances through monthly technical meetings, which has been very popular. We get more than about an average 60 to 70 participants every month. And we have had representation talks in this meetings from a variety of participants, from a diverse group of participants, from startup companies like Icon in additive construction or Safe AI in autonomous construction and off-world mining. And then, of course, talks about low TRL and met TRL work from NASA. And then we've had big companies, established companies like Bechtel talking about lunar mega projects, or space architecture company SOM, you see in the lower left corner, talking about architectural and space architectural considerations for lunar manufacturing. So next slide, please. So now that we have a thriving community, we want to build on that. And going forward, we have decided that our mission, whatever we do, both on the consortium side and on the systems integrated side, we will be guided by this overarching goal, which is to help NASA set the stage for a big RFP for the 2030 lunar base development. To do so, we want to enhance and smoothen interaction between a terrestrial construction industry and space industry like NASA. We want to help develop RFIs and RFPs that are easily understood by all stakeholders. We would like to play a big part in providing recommendations for upcoming excavation and construction specific CLIPS missions, CLIPS activities, and of course, help NASA in technical areas as and when needed. Next slide, please.
1 minute.
Thank you. So in that spirit, we came up with our 2021-2022 annual goal, Lsic annual goal, and that is lunar infrastructure repair and outfitting. So we feel that a lunar base will inevitably need capabilities in the area of repair, in-situ fabrication of small parts, and outfitting. And we feel that this area is it's not on the radar screen right now, and we would like to bring it to the fore, and we want to initiate the development of a roadmap for this area, which will gain more and more importance as we embark on building a lunar base. And some of the areas of investigation, for instance, will be spare parts for lunar base, outfitting requirements, and what kind of special purpose robots and autonomous operations we can use for maintenance and repair activities. And of course, create an industry government ecosystem and a supply chain framework for these activities. So yeah, I encourage you to join our focus group, send me an email, or go to our website, and looking forward to seeing you. Over.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Okay, so we are going to take a moment to write your questions in the Q&A function for Zoom. Please remember to direct your question to the facilitator that you have in mind to answer it. It is okay for it to be directed to any of them. That's fine as well. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Dr. Wesley Fuhrman, he is our facilitator for surface power, and he'll be telling you about the activities of his group over the last year. Whenever you're ready, Wes.
Great, thank you. So I'm Wes Fuhrman, the APL lead for the Surface Power Focus Group. So the Surface Power Focus Group, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. The Surface Power Focus Group, like all of the focus groups, is all about communication. So that includes, of course, power-specific topics, but power is not a means unto itself. And so a big part of our responsibility is to communicate with the broader consortium. And so that also goes both ways, from soliciting information on power needs, as well as disseminating the latest developments in power for the lunar surface. So you can see here, there's a picture of me as well as John Scott, our NASA point of contact. If you're attending any of our monthly telecons, his face should be familiar. He's done a great job really being there and being transparent and communicating what the solicitations are, and being really helpful with that. So I want to thank him for that in particular. So there's our meetings. Like all the other focus groups, we have a mailing list, a website, and a Surface Power Wiki. We also have a who's who, which is being populated. I see entries going in right now, even during this meeting. So thank you guys for participating in that. I also want to thank the additional APL representatives who have been part of this and going to ramp up a bit more as we go on. Dr. Jody Burtis, who's going to be involved with some strategic planning and strengthening some of our cross-focus group coordination, as well as Samantha Andrade. Sam's going to be working to coordinate some of the focus groups that we've started to spin up. And the way that we're working focus groups in the surface power group is to have both continuing subgroups in the areas where you have typical needs, PMAD, generation, and storage, as well as having dynamic on-the-fly subgroups for when a topic of high interest comes up, so that we can convene on a really short time scale to address the need. For instance, in a recent telecon a couple months ago, during the discussion, power beaming came up as something that was of interest to a broad number of our members. And so by the end of the meeting, we had started on our plans for our upcoming power beaming workshop, which will be the last slide that I show here. So go ahead and go on to the next slide. So our first year goal was really to build a community, provide that access that I was talking about, John as facilitating and Ray Beach before him, and to create venues where we could have a discussion of technological capabilities, maturation, and gaps. So those monthly meetings are really the most fundamental to that. We also have multiple avenues for communication, including email, Confluence, off-cycle meetings, and LinkedIn. Confluence is bolded here because that's moving forward is going to be what we're really emphasizing and has been really taking up quite a bit. So the Surface Power Focus Group was involved in some of the planning for the LSIC fall meeting. So the theme of the meeting was the interrelationships between focus areas, especially in the context of surface power. And so our group got to do some of that designing of the breakout sessions and helping with some of that. And then, of course, we've been facilitating an access and communication to NASA, as I said. Go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. So here's just a collage of some of the activities that we've been doing over that past year. So our keystone event was that fall meeting, which had power as a central focus and led to literally hundreds of comments and discussion points, which have been distilled and communicated to NASA. Our telecons themselves have featured a variety of presentations, both on power-specific technologies, as well as from the from the power user base, as well as NASA microgrid discussion, which frames this power systems quite nicely, design reference missions, and so on. Next slide. And so that was what we've done over the past year. Now I'll talk about some of what we're going to work towards over this next year. So now the overarching vision can start to evolve from building the community to leveraging that community, in particular for making recommendations on how we can achieve appropriate scale power-related technologies that are needed to enable sustained presence and exploration. And so to work towards this, we're going to first work on connecting that user base that we've developed, those power experts, outward to their potential user base. And we're going to try to frame that discussion by the economic and institutional drivers that set that scale of power demand. The idea being that this can enable us to identify those near-term needs for immediate prioritization, as well as the long-term goals that will impact the very early architectural decisions. So how we are, thank you. I'll go pretty quickly. So you can see that there's several things we've identified about how we're going to connect to the user base and the economic drivers as well. Go to the next slide. I want to make sure I get in time to talk about two of the prescient events that we have going on. One is a vertical solar array technology super telecom. This is our next monthly meeting, but it's going to feature representation from surface power, dust mitigation, and extreme environments, and we'll be able to hear about the 5 technologies that were selected for that phase 1 VSAT. So I'm very excited about this. Next slide. And the other is our power beaming workshop, which I mentioned at the beginning of this, and we have planned for mid-July 2021. So the first day will be context and demand, to sort of place where power beaming can fit its niche, and hear from those who might use it, such as ISRU or exploration within the PSRs. And day 2 will be deeper technical discussions. This is particularly relevant right now because there's been a couple space tech solicitations which are covering challenges which are related to potentially power beaming solutions. And so there's lots of people who are interested in this, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing all of their developments. And that's it for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Wes. So we'll take one moment to put questions in the Q&A for Wes, and then we'll go into the panel. Great, thank you. So now we're going to be entering the panel portion of this session. So Wes, since you were last, how about we go first with you? You up for that?
Okay.
So how do you think the needs of your focus group are reflected in the current and planned opportunities for NASA STMD? And perhaps a good follow-up, if you could design the next NASA solicitation for your focus group, what would it cover?
Sure. These are great questions. So I think that quite obviously by the WASP on the moon and the luster challenges I mentioned, those solicitations are very much meeting the community's needs quite well. As far as what I would design next, that's quite a difficult question, actually. But I would say it'd be interesting to have something where we could be sort of as specific and tangible as possible. So a challenge that could be centered maybe around a specific landing site and some activity that's related to that.
Great. Any other takers?
If I may,
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I'd like to add, before answering the question, I just wanted to point out that for excavation and construction focus group, we also have a who's who on Confluence I failed to mention. And we are going to have some workshops coming up pretty soon now that we have decided on our annual goal. So about that, I think also another area that could be really beneficial is technology transfer between NASA and commercial entities, especially the small entities. There's a lot of technology in NASA that maybe the commercial entities can use for this purpose. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Jorge Nuñez, here's a question from Alex Bennett. A lot of focus with dust mitigation is by keeping the dust out. Is there any focus on the systems in your group, such as for compliant mechanisms that can run dirty and could go without dust mitigation?
Yeah, that was a really great question, and actually, sadly, I didn't get to it in too much detail during my presentation. But one of the outcomes of the workshop that people, mentioned loud and clear was, right, that we need to try to develop some kind of standards, right, because you're not going to be able to keep all the dust out, right, and so there needs to be some kind of level of standards in terms of what is sort of, be able things to operate dirty, right, and so having a certain level of threshold in terms of what is allowable, right, and so maybe things that we need to start thinking about, right, is not only in terms of, mitigate the dust, right, but also just dust tolerance, right, and so at what level of dust amount in terms of for operations. And then the other thing is maybe there are certain things that are, also to consider is, maybe we just need to be able to replace it after maybe 2 years, right? That's something that we do here on Earth, and that's something that also needs to be considered also for the moon.
Great. Okay, so the next question. This is probably a little bit more general for all of you. So as the audience may not know, and initially we had a very different setup with facilitators, and it's actually gradually trending to a different setup. Can you explain how your interaction with your group's NASA point of contact is currently working, and how it is beginning to evolve in the next few months as we go into a new phase of the work we're doing?
Who do you want to take it?
How about Ben Greenhagen? Do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so it's very exciting, the expansion to additional resources beyond the ISRU and surface power areas, which have been going a little bit longer. So, they could probably comment a little bit more on how those interactions have been going. But meeting with NASA POCs, scheduling technical interchange meetings, it's going to provide a lot more tools for us to be responsive to what the community is asking for. And so I think it's a very exciting opportunity.
Great.
Sure. RC can comment a little bit on that, right? We've been meeting, like I said in the presentation, with Jerry and Omar and a few others on a regular basis every week, and there we give them an update on how the IRCU focus group is going, and we get insights from them on where NASA is going and information that we can give to the focus group at large. So we have a very tight collaboration with our NASA counterparts, and we look forward to actually taking information we learn from the focus group and passing that information on to NASA through our counterparts there, through Jerry and Dan and Omar and all. So far it's been very effective, and I don't think I'd change much of it at all. It's been very inclusive.
Great, thank you. All right, here is a question from Sarah Zeitz. She actually has two questions. Let's start with the first one. What is LSIC's position on or policy regarding participation from outside the US? For example, participation from past project collaborators or researchers with mining or Arctic remote sites experience in Canada. How about Angela Stickle? Dr. Stickle, you haven't gone yet. Would you care to chime in on this one?
Sure. I think our policy is very open. LSIC is not an organization that's limited to only U.S. participation. We welcome international collaborators in the discussions. Of course, there are solicitations from NASA that may be U.S. only, and that is, just the way that the funding works through there. But for, as was mentioned earlier by several folks, going back to the moon can and should be an international endeavor. And so everybody who is interested in technology development in all of these focus areas, I think, is welcome. And we would love to have you join in the discussions with us.
Great, thank you. Here's a question from Doug White, and he directs it to the entire panel. how often do you or your focus groups interact with TechPort, the repository for NASA-funded technology development efforts? Let's see. How about we go back to Wes?
I would say this would be a question that would be best posed to our focus group. That's something that I could look into, including in some of the upcoming surveys and things that we have.
Yeah, great. Okay, so this is a little bit more general question for the group. So what's happened throughout the year with your focus group in a way that you didn't expect that turned out to be a good thing, or perhaps you're trying to accommodate? How about we ask Karl? Karl Hibbitts, how about you take that one?
Hey, Josh. Right. I'll be happy to address that. So when we start out, we were trying to figure out if we want to use Mattermost or whatnot. We end up using Confluence, right, as our communications, offline communications in between the monthly focus group meetings. And that has turned out to be both really useful and also difficult to get going, right? So it's been very useful to keep conversations going in some cases and put out who's who in IRSU and provide resources. But also it's been challenging to continue the conversations in some specific areas. So, yeah, what was unexpected about it was the level of interest in some of the conversations and the effectiveness of networking. What was expected is sometimes it's hard to keep the conversations going, and so we encourage people to always go back, sign up for notifications from Confluence so you can see what's going on and you can participate them, or just delete the email if you aren't interested.
So that's great, Karl. So, you know, that it's also a pretty key area of Confluence where international participation can occur, right? So that, you know, all different time zones, they don't necessarily have to tune in to the group meeting, but they can still chime in.
Excellent point.
Okay, so here is one from Chris Shove. Dr. Chatterjee, I am developing habitats in Alaska, and permafrost is a critical issue. Has your group addressed building on the moon with possible melting of lunar ice or destabilizing of structures?
Good question. It coincidentally aligns with another project I'm working on Arctics. Yes, we haven't yet looked at it specifically, to be honest with you. But what we certainly plan to do is to leverage the learnings from Antarctica Base Camp, McMurdo Base Camp, the findings and learnings from developing the McMurdo Base Camp there, what are the lessons learned and things like that. And also Arctic is a very strong area of interest nowadays for obvious reasons because of melting and a lot of commercial and military activities there. So permafrost melting is a big theme in Arctic also. So those learnings, those terrestrial learnings, we will apply to the lunar surface. Yeah, thank you. Good question.
Okay, so here's a question from Sandy. It's a little bit longer of one. It seems like it's hard to figure out what the spare parts are needed question without knowing what the systems are. Perhaps a better question to consider is how to design for minimum spare parts and what might be involved in doing that. Manufacturing technology, native resources, etc. Another question, what can we identify that must be resupplied regardless of the exact system design? Let's see, do we have any takers for that? Who haven't?
I'll just comment real quickly on that, but I don't have too much. Joe McGuire gave a great talk on modularity and space resurfacing of HST and spacecraft Earth orbiting, and mentioned, please, these processes should also be used on the moon because things will fail and you need to be modular. So you need, I think as Sandy pointed out, design in modularity from the beginning in developing, in our case, IRSU technology systems, right? Because they will fail, they'll need to be repaired in some way.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you, Karl. Let's see. perhaps we can do one last question here. Dr. Chatterjee, interplanetary supply chains and space logistics involves, oh, it popped around. Here we go. Interplanetary supply chains and space logistics involve more than just spare parts. Are you aware of the work that MIT has been doing in this area? I'm sorry. Do you think you can respond to that? A little bit more detail.
So the very short answer in the remaining 30 seconds or so we have is that I'm vaguely aware of it, that they're doing something, but I haven't looked into it in great details. But that is exactly what we want to do, what we had in mind when we chose this annual goal about looking at these things. But thanks a lot for bringing this to our attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So any last comments from any of the panelists before we move on to our next session?
Say thank you to people for participating, and we want to, want you to continue participating in these focus groups and discussions.
Thank you, Jorge.
Second that.
Yeah, I just want to say, what they're trying to do is not easy job, and I've been watching them do it, and I've gained even more respect for them over the last year than I had beforehand. Thank you all very much for your efforts, and